Good morning. You're watching All You Need to Know on Bloomberg Quint Live, India's first digital live streaming business news service, and I'm Darshan Mehta. First, the headlines. Asian markets are off to a positive start to optimism over trade negotiations between the United States and China. Reports suggest that the US and China have reached a consensus in principle on the major topics in their trade negotiations. The Relaince Group has reached a standstill agreement with more than 90% of its lenders. The lenders will not sell any pledged shares till September. The RBI may impose a penalty on Yes Bank, saying that the risk assessment report was a confidential document and its disclosures were also an attempt to mislead. And Finance Minister Arun Jaitley will meet officials of the Reserve Bank of India in their annual post-budget consultations today. Equities surged to a 10-month high as US consumer outlook brightened and the positive development in China trade overshadowed lingering concerns about the global growth. Treasury yields climbed while the dollar reiterated after an early morning rally. Abigail Doolittle of Bloomberg News gives us the highlights of this report.
Stocks finished higher in Friday's Wall Street session. In fact, it was a solid to even a great rally for the major averages. The Dow outperformed, up 1.7%. The S&P 500 up about 1.1%. The tech-heavy NASDAQ, though, did lag, but up just 0.6%, so a greater than 1% divergence between the NASDAQ and the Dow, and a piece of it, the financial sector. Now, all 11 of the S&P 500 sectors were trading higher, but they were led by the financials, up more than 2%, really helping, again, the Dow and the S&P 500. Behind that bank strength, Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway. They added to many of their bank positions, financial sector positions, including JP Morgan, Bank of America. Some investors and traders seem to see this as a sign that the Oracle of Omaha sees strength ahead for the banks. PepsiCo was another big winner on the day, up 3% despite a somewhat lackluster quarter and shaving guidance, but they are talking about growth in both snacks and their North American beverage sector, so investors liking that. Plus, they will be returning about $8 billion to shareholders this year. On the downside, though, and really dragging on that NASDAQ, the FANGs down about 0.8%. Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Alphabet all trading lower, not for a reason. It'll be important to watch to see whether or not investors continue to quietly take profits in some of those names while other sectors do so well. But confirming it was certainly a risk-on day. Haven bonds were lower, and on the week it was risk-on too. That tech-heavy NASDAQ up for an 8th week in a row, the longest winning weekly winning streak since August of 2016. From New York, Abigail Doolittle, Bloomberg News.
Okay, because of the US markets, also Asian markets have started to do well. The Nikkei is up almost 1.6%. Most of the other Asian markets, be it the Korean markets as well as the Australian markets, are trading with a positive bias. Let's get in more details on how Asia is trading. Rosalind Chin of Bloomberg News joins us from Hong Kong. Good morning, Rosalind. Thanks for joining in. What's the sense that you're getting in? A lot of optimism built in because of the trade negotiations between the US and China. What's the latest?
You're exactly right. We're seeing optimism there with Asian markets following Wall Street's higher close. And we do see that the MSCI Asia Pacific Index is up by more than 1%. As you mentioned, Japanese stocks are doing fairly well, in fact, leading the gains in the region. Of course, we've had statements out from both the US and Chinese sides on the trade talks. A little bit different, though. The US side saying that much work remains. China mentioned a consensus in principle. But generally, I think investors are taking this as a positivity because there are more talks going on in Washington this week, and there's a discussion of whether they're going to extend the deadline or come to a deal of some kind. So that is permeating through to the market so far. In Japan, we have the topics up by 1.3%, Nikkei up by 1.6%. In South Korea, the Kospi is up by 0.8%. Chip makers like Samsung and SK Hynix making gains there. In Hong Kong, Hang Seng up by 1.4%, of course, opened not that long ago. Gaming stocks there are making a recovery after a pretty steep sell-off on Friday. That is after Chinese sort of a new judicial interpretation, as it were, of an existing law on illegal forex activities was announced in China. So that caused a lot of a focus on gaming stocks. We have Wynn Macau, Sands China and MGM China all in the green at this point in the session today. MGM China up, in fact, nearly 4% at this point in the session. JP Morgan saying Friday's sell-off in those gaming stocks was probably too severe. And finally, over to Australia. Australia's S&P ASX 200 making gains of about 1/3 of 1%. Some optimistic earnings guidance out there helping that market trade higher in this session. Back to you.
Many thanks for that, Rosalind. We'll certainly watch out how Asia pans out through the day. But the first round of trade talks between US and China ended without a deal in Beijing. However, both the sides have cited optimism over the progress being made in the talks. China has issued a statement saying that both parties have reached an in-principle consensus on major issues. Tom McKenzie and Derek Wallbank of Bloomberg News give us an update on this report.
Well, we know that President Trump is being briefed, or was briefed over the weekend, by some of the trade negotiators who had been in Beijing, of course, talking with Vice Premier Liu He and others on the Chinese side. So the president still remaining relatively upbeat, despite, as you say, some caution from the statement, at least from the US side, around the need for much more work to be done. More work remains, according to the statement from the US. The US side also said that the talks were detailed and intensive. On the other side, the Chinese statement really focused on the fact that they said there was a consensus in principle on major issues. That was not mentioned in the US statement. Both sides talking about intellectual property transfer, tech transfer, and non-tariff barriers being discussed at those talks in Beijing. Interesting that there was an editorial in the state-run China Daily really trying to portray this as the two-sided impact of this trade war, saying that yes, it had impacted China's economy, but China had remained relatively resilient, and pointing out that US companies were feeling the pressure now as well.
Yeah, so a little bit more of a measured response from the U.S. Derek, what can we expect from this week's talks now? Where does the conversation go?
Well, I think that's quite right. You have to focus on the upcoming March 1 deadline, which President Trump told reporters last week he's now open to extending. We had heard that, and Bloomberg had reported something along those lines, but President Trump just, coming out and saying it. That's really the next big thing. The next talks that we're talking about coming up this week in Washington, as they move there, we're really looking for additional progress on some of these detailed points. Again, the U.S. statement that came out was really sort of, let me say, bland. It was devoid of details. One might not have gotten such a positive read out of it. Then President Trump's talking suggested that they're maybe a little bit closer than they would have earlier appeared. This is all gearing up on the U.S. side for Trump talking with Xi, probably sometime in early mid-March, at which point they plan to have a final deal done. But if the talks are really going as well as President Trump indicated, then maybe next week we could actually see some details on some of these key sticking point provisions.
While trade talks are making progress, President Donald Trump declared a national emergency to ensure more funds for his proposed border wall. However, his order is likely to face legal as well as legislative hurdle. Bloomberg's Jody Schneider brings us an update on this report.
I think we're going to see challenges on both the judicial front and the legislative front, perhaps as soon as this week. First of all, there is expected that there will be legal challenges. We expected all along, if this was to happen, there would be legal challenges pretty quickly. Nancy Pelosi, a Democrat, the House Speaker, has said that they perhaps will file challenges, but we can expect them on several fronts, I think. And also, now we're going to see both in the House and perhaps by Democrats in the Senate challenges legislatively that they want to go ahead and try to pass a resolution opposing this. Of course, these resolutions are not binding and won't have a lot of effect, but it does show that there is a lot of concern in Congress, and perhaps some Republicans will cross the aisle and vote for these. There's concern among some Republicans that the president has overstepped his bounds, that Congress handles spending, that not the executive branch, and they are concerned about this kind of action. So it looks like there'll be a lot of opposition to this, and that opposition will take some forms of legislative and judicial protest, perhaps this very week.
Okay, let's take a look at what the trade setup looks like at this point of time. The SGX Nifty is indicating a positive outlook, but nevertheless, despite the strong cues that we're seeing in Asia and the US markets, it's just up 11 points, and we have been under tremendous pressure for the last few days. Even on Friday, we ended down by almost 20 points, but the carnage clearly was seen as far as the mid-cap and the small-cap end of the market is concerned, both down close to 1%, while the Nifty managed to stay flat. Look at what happened as far as the Nifty is concerned, Bank Nifty is concerned, and the Nifty PSU Banking banking index was down almost 2%. So heavy selling was seen as far as some of these indices was concerned. Basically, if you're looking at some of how the ADRs panned out in trade, Dr. Reddy's was down almost 5% in trade, reflecting what had happened in India only. Wipro, Vedanta, ICICI Bank were also down anywhere over 1% in trade. The only one that managed to move on higher was Tata Motors. Apart from it, it was a weak day for ADRs in the US markets. Now, if you're looking at the fund flows, FI sold in 966 crores in the cash market. DIs bought in 853 crores in the cash market. Now, basically, in terms of how the Nifty panned out in trade, the Nifty was down almost 21 points, and that was on account of the selling as far as the HDFC twins was concerned. Sun Pharma and TCS also led selling. The only thing that held the Nifty higher when the entire market was going through carnage was basically Reliance, which contributed 17 points on the upside. If that was not there, we would have been much more in the red. So that's the trend that we're seeing on the Nifty itself. As far as the F&O market is concerned, again, we saw a lot of long unwinding that came in. We've now at the 10,750 mark after hitting the 11,000 mark in the last series. There was clear indication of long unwinding. The Nifty Bank seems to be even weaker because there are fresh short positions that are taken. 26,840 is the level, and the premium has actually contracted significantly for the Nifty Bank. Now, where are positions taken? From 10,800 to 11,000. Again, call writers are active and put writers are active from levels of 10,800 to lower levels. Basically, there will be a lot of resistance that's coming in at the 11,000 level. What happened on Friday was the fact that put writers actually shed in positions at higher levels since the Nifty was trading weak, and call writers again wrote in at 10,700 and 10,800. Now, in terms of the PCR ratio, in terms of the stock, let's see what's happened. The VIX has managed to move in much higher given the fact that the market is looking volatile. The other factor is the Nifty PCR, which moved down to 1.30 from 1.35. The Nifty Bank PCR also managed to move down to 1.06 from 1.20. As far as the stocks in the F&O band are concerned, Adani Enterprises, Jain Irrigation, Jet Airways remain in the F&O band. The other counters that are there include Reliance Power, CG Power, PC Jewellers. A whole host of stocks are there in the F&O band. IDBI Bank comes out of the F&O band this time around. The other factors that we need to watch out is how the open interest build-up did happen. Page saw fresh shorts, open interest build-up of 23% post the Kotak note, highlighting some bit of concerns as far as their results was concerned. Again, ITC managed saw open interest build-up of 16%, and that moved up almost 1% in trade. And that actually because of the ETF, Bharat 22 ETF buying that could come in. TVS Motors was weak. You had DCB Bank, which was weak, and Dr. Reddy's, which was weak on decent open interest build-up. As far as companies, stocks which saw short covering or long unwinding was seen in counters like SRF, Escort, Muthoot Finance, and SBI. A little bit of short covering was seen in NHPC this time around. So this is all the trade setup that you saw. Now let's see what's making headlines across the globe. Ravi Innocencio of Bloomberg News brings us the first word headlines.
The ECB admits a slowdown in the Eurozone is, quote, significant, and the bank could change its rates guidance if it becomes clear the situation is not temporary. It says the extent of the weakness at the end of last year took policymakers by surprise, with Italy sliding into recession and Germany only narrowly missing the same fate. The bank says global uncertainty is the main problem facing the Eurozone economy. Theresa May is pleading with Conservative Party colleagues to unite behind her Brexit deal as she prepares to go back to Brussels for yet more talks. She goes amid more signs of stress triggered by the split from Europe. The regional airline FlyBMI stopped flying and said Brexit was partly to blame, while Airbus said a no-deal divorce would be, quote, catastrophic and would lead to a rethink on UK investment. Australia expects to finalize a trade deal with the UK by the end of the year in the event of a no-deal Brexit. Formal talks can't begin until March 29th, but Trade Minister Simon Birmingham told the FT he would like to see negotiations completed by the end of this year. The two countries signed an agreement in January aimed at boosting post-Brexit trade and ensuring products meet technical regulations. And Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince says his country has signed so-called memorandums of understanding in Pakistan worth $20 billion. Mohammed bin Salman was welcomed by Prime Minister Imran Khan at the start of an Asian trading tour that will also take him to India and China. The promises of investment in Pakistan include deals in agriculture and energy, among them a $10 billion oil refinery. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Ramy Inocencio, and this is Bloomberg.
Nikki Mirchudani joins us with all the stocks that are in news today. Nikki, which are the stocks that will be at the center of action today?
Morning, Darshan. A couple of news that we're tracking. First one that we're tracking is Spark, where the company's Sun Pharma subsidiary, Sun Pharma Global FC, said that it's not planning to launch Lipsia in US market, and accordingly has returned, was going to be returning the product right back to Sun Pharma Advanced Research Company. The license was given to the arm back in July 2016 and was eligible for royalties upon the commercialization. Now, with this and a bit of a setback for the company may have to find another partner for commercializing the product. Also, we expect ADAG shares to remain in focus today, given that Anil Ambani Group has reached to an understanding with more than 90% of the lenders at promoter group level. The lenders are not to enforce security and not sell any of the promoters' pledged share until a time period of around September 30, 2019. Sale, well, that's a little development that has come in, where the company has first annulled in the expression of interest for divesting around 100% stake in its Durgapur alloy steel plant, but also at the same time in its press release has said that a fresh process now will be initiated with the approval of the government, and they're shortly going to be issuing the EOI. It remains to be unseen. I mean, it was not quite clear why the company has done that. It's a part largely of the divestment strategy that the company had undertaken a few years back, but then the reason clearly it is not disclosed in the press release. Also, we're looking at Yes Bank, where RBI has pulled up Yes Bank for selectively revealing a confidential report which has led in a 30% surge in stock price. It has called the disclosure as a deliberate attempt to mislead the public. MBL, where the SPV has commenced in the commercial production of the project at Rajasthan, and where in this project the company had an equity investment of more than around 200 odd crore. Since approval, this is the fourth public interest project that the company has completed, and also the company in its press release has disclosed that it's going to be completing in 5 more projects by the period of March 2019. Back to you.
There's lots to talk over the course of the day, and you'll find it all on the live market action on Bloomberg Quint. There are also a few stories that you should consider reading on our website, bloombergquint.com. Here they are. Anil Ambani-led Relaince Group has reached a standstill agreement with more than 90% of its lenders, under which they will not sell any of the shares pledged by the promoters till September under the pact. The group will pay the principal and interest amount to the lenders as per the scheduled due dates, while it also has appointed investment bankers for part placement of the group's direct 30% stake in Reliance Power to institutional investors. The investment bankers will begin roadshows for the share placement soon. Vodafone Idea is likely to mop up about 20,000 crore rupees from the post-stake sale in the mobile tower firm Indus Tower and monetization of the optical fiber assets. The country's largest telecom operator plans to use the funds for lowering its debt, which stood at approximately 1,20,000 crores at the end of 2018. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of All You Need to Know. Stay tuned to Bloomberg Quint for more news and updates.